Let's get the introduction about the chapter. This chapter is an extract taken from the biography of the world famous scientist Albert Einstein's book, The Young Einstein, written by Patrick Pringle. In this biographical piece, the writer discusses about the childhood of Albert Einstein. He starts the chapter with Einstein's disagreement on the rote learning with his history teacher. Einstein wanted to get away from the system of education which was followed in his days in the Munich city. So he decided he should collect the medical certificate from a doctor which would declare that he has had a nervous breakdown and needs the rest for the period of the 6 months. Only his math teachers in the school admired Einstein for his brilliance. The writer tries to familiarize the readers with those worst years of Einstein's life when he had to struggle each day in his diploma school. And as each day passed, it seemed to him that to get cleared his diploma over there is like a far-fetched dreams. Hence, we also come to know about the few encounters of Einstein with his history teacher, along with the way how Albert, the schoolboy, he tries to get out of the miserable place that is the school, and how the things turned out in the end. So it makes the story really very interesting. Let's now start the chapter. Let's talk about the writer Patrick Pringle. His full name is Lawrence Patrick Pringle. He was born in the year 1935 in Rochester. He was the freelance writer, photographer, wildlife biologist and educator. He grew up in Mandan, a rural town. It is in the south of his birthplace. He was educated in a one-room schoolhouse where one teacher used to handle the first 8 grades classes. In the year 1945, the schoolhouse closed and Pringle was sent to a central school in Hanoi Falls. The school, the author recalled in SAS, had a library that fed his hunger for the books. He had worked as a high school science teacher in Lima Central School, Lima, New York, in the year 1961 and 62. Then he worked as an associate editor and senior editor in the American Museum of Natural History. And then he also worked as an executive editor of the children's magazine Natural and Science. In 1958, he began his master's degree program. And then afterwards, while doing his research on cottontails, he earned his degree. And then he continued to pursue his interest in mammalian predators. In 1968, he published his first book, Dinosaurs and the World. In 1958, he began his master's degree program. While doing his research on cottontails, he earned his degree and then continued to pursue his interest in mammalian predators. In 1968, he published his first book, Dinosaurs and the World. And then he became a freelance writer in the year 1970. Thus, Pringle has been praised as one of the top writers of the informational books for the readers from the elementary through high school. Here is the list of the character sketches of the story. First is Albert Einstein, whom you will meet here as a student, who is the well-known scientist of the world. Mr. Braun, his history teacher. Yuri, that is the close and only friend of Albert in Munich, Germany. Mr. Koch, that is a mathematics teacher who was fond of Albert Einstein. Landlady, who rented the room to Albert, head teacher, that is the headmaster of a school. Dr. Ernest Whale, that is the doctor who specializes in nerves, but he is the close friend of Yuri. Elsa, Albert's cousin. Look at the chapter Albert Einstein at School. Albert Einstein, 1879 till 1955, is regarded as the greatest physicist since Newton. In the following extract from the young Einstein, the well-known biographer Patrick Pringle describes the circumstances which led to Albert Einstein's expulsion from a German school. Here, expulsion, that is the action of forcing someone to leave any organization. Here in this chapter, that is actually the biographical piece, the writer is discussing about the childhood of the famous theoretical physicist Albert Einstein. So here, this part is taken from the Young Einstein book written by the Patrick Pringle. We come to know how the famous scientist Einstein also had to undergo difficulties and the problems in his German diploma school during his childhood. And thus, gradually, with his hard work and determination, he became the successful scientist of the world. See the first paragraph. In what year Einstein asked the history teacher, did the Prussians defeat the French at Waterloo? I didn't know, sir. Why don't you know? You have been told it often enough. I must have forgotten. Did you ever try to learn? Asked Mr. Braun. No, sir, Albert replied with his usual unthinking honesty. Why not? I cannot see any point in learning dates. One can always look them up in a book. Here, the story starts. Here, the chapter begins with the description of one of the incidents of Einstein's childhood days in his German diploma school in Munich. One day in his class, his history teacher asked him the question about one incident of the history, that was the Battle of Waterloo. He asked the boy, when did the Prussians defeated the French in this battle? He simply replied he didn't know the answer. The teacher scolded him that he had reminded many times in the class why he did not remember. Then again, frankly, he replied that he might have forgotten. To this, his history teacher, Mr. Braun, again became angry. He said that the boy never bothered to learn the history in the school. To this, again, with this common, unthinking sincerity, the boy showed and replied that he was not interested in learning the things. The teacher again inquired why he was not interested in learning the dates. He simply replied that he did not find any point in learning these dates, as everything can be looked up easily in the books. Then why to waste the time to learn these useless dates in the mind? Mr. Braun was speechless for a few moments. The teacher was now dumbstruck to hear such response from the boy. You amaze me, Einstein, he said at last. Don't you realize that one can always look most things up in the books? That applies to all the facts you learn at school. Yes, sir. Then I suppose you don't see any point in learning facts. Frankly, sir, I don't, said Albert. Then you don't believe in education at all? Oh, yes, sir, I do. I don't think learning facts is education. The teacher was not expecting for such response. So finally he replied and explains that similarly most of the things which are taught in the school can be looked up and learned from the books. So it applies to the all facts and all learning in the school education. Now to get the views of the boy that learning facts is not education, the teacher finally concludes that if the boy believes so, that there is no point in grasping the facts, then he does not believe in any education. To this, Albert very clearly replies that really it is true that only learning the facts is not the education at all. In that case, said the history teacher with heavy sarcasm, perhaps you will be so kind as to tell the class the Einstein theory of education. Albert flushed. I think it is not the facts that matter, but ideas. He said, I don't see the point in learning the dates of battles or even which of the armies killed more men. I would be more interested in learning why those soldiers were trying to kill each other. Heavy sarcasm, that means mockery or satire. Flushed, that means become red in confusion. Once again, to hear the views of the boy, the history teacher makes an attempt to mock him in front of the whole class and asks the boy to tell his own version of the ideal education. That means he should now tell the class what is exactly the theory of education is. At first, when he was called by the teacher to come in front and explain the theory of education before the class, Albert felt blushed. He felt insulted, as he never expected this behavior. But then he started explaining. He said that it is not the education if you learn the facts, but the thing that matters in learning. It is the collection of the ideas. He said there is no logic to learn the dates of some battles and to remember and analyze that how many people of the armies were killed on each side. He said the thing which matters in the battle is to compare and analyze what would be the reason of the battles between the two nations. So this is the learning. That's enough, Mr. Brown's eyes were cold and cruel. We don't want a lecture from you, Einstein. You will stay in for an extra period today. Although I don't imagine it will do you much good. It won't do the school any good either. You are a disgrace. I don't know why you continue to come. Disgrace, that means insult. Now, to get lecture from the school boy, the teacher got extremely angry and interrupted in between the speech of Einstein and gave him the punishment to stay for the extra class, even if he said not good for anyone, including Albert, to give him such punishment, as he thinks that it was not going to make any effect on the. Then he comments about the boy to be a big insult. He says it is really a big shame for the school to possess such low-level children. And then he also added that it is really unknown why Einstein still is coming to the school. That means why he was coming to the school if he did not want to get the education over there. It is not my wish, sir, Albert pointed out. Then you are an ungrateful boy and ought to be ashamed of yourself. I suggest you ask your father to take you away. Ungrateful, that means unthankful. To the teacher's question why he was still coming to the school, the boy replied he did not either wish to come to the school. At first, the teacher remarked about the boy to be very unthankful. He said if he was not interested in his studies, he should insist his parents to take him away from there. Albert felt miserable when he left school that afternoon. Not that it had been a bad day, most days were bad now. Anyway, but because he had to go back to the hateful place the next morning. He only wished his father would take him away. But there was not point in even asking. Now next, here it is explained. The same afternoon, when Albert went back home from the school, he was feeling very bad. It was not the single day that he had to feel bad, but now, generally, all the days were getting bad at the school, and he hated with the thought of going to the school every morning. His only wish was that his father should come and take him away back to his own country, Italy, along with him. But it was pointless to ask his father about this because he would anyway make him stay here until he completed his education. Going back to his lodgings did not cheer him up. His father had so little money to spare that Albert had been found a room in one of the poorest quarters of Munich. He did not mind the bad food and lack of comfort, or even the dirt and squalor, but he hated the atmosphere of slum violence. Lodgings, that is a temporary accommodation or rented room. Squalor is the state of being extremely dirty and unpleasant one, especially as a result of poverty and neglect. So here it is mentioned that for the boy Einstein, the school was not only the unpleasant place for the boy to go, but even his place of staying in Munich was also nothing better. Because of the limited cash available with his father, that means due to his father's poverty, the boy had to stay within the poorest neighborhood in the Munich city. However, poverty, bad food, dirt, and lack of comfort hardly bothered the boy there. But it was the slum violence, that means the frequent fights at the place, that he hated the most. Usually, the landlady of his rented room, she was also quite violent one, as she used to beat her children every now and then, while her husband, when he returned back on every Saturday, he was always drunk. He used to beat the lady in return. That's why he hated the place where he was living there in the Munich. But at least you have a room of your own, which is more than I can say, said Yuri when he called round in the evening. At least you live among civilized human beings, even if they are all poor students, said Albert. They are not all civilized, Yuri replied. Did you not hear that one of them was killed last week in a duel? Civilized means polite or well-mannered. Duel, that is a fight between two people with the deadly weapons. Now here at this point of the story, there is an entry of one more character, Yuri, in the story, who is a close friend of Einstein. He also did not belong to some well-to-do family. He reminds Albert to feel glad that he has to thank God that he has a room of his own in the city, though his neighborhood is not the good one. In return, Albert reminds Yuri that even though Yuri lives among the poor children in the hostel, but they are all civilized and non-violent. Albert was feeling bad that he was living in such polluted and slum atmosphere. He felt jealous of his friend that he was living among the decent children. To this, Yuri replied that they were not all decent and well mannered. To this, Yuri interrupts and corrects him by saying that not all of them have the good manners, as the last week one of the poor boys had killed the another one in a fight. And what happens to the one who killed him? Nothing, of course. He's even proud of it. His only worry is that the authorities have told him not to fight any more duels. He's upset about this because he has not got a single scar on his face to wear for the rest of his life as a badge of honor. Oh, exclaimed Albert. And these are the students? Well, you will be a student one day, said Yuri. Scar, that means the injury mark. Now, at the information of the murder of the one child, Einstein inquired, and what happens to the one who killed him? Nothing, of course. He's even proud of it. His only worry is that the authorities have told him not to fight any more duels. He's upset about this because he has not got a single scar on his face to wear for the rest of his life as a badge of honor. Oh, exclaimed Albert. And these are the students? Well, you will be a student one day, said Yuri. Scar, that means the injury mark. Now, at the information of the murder of the one child, Einstein inquires, what happened to the boy who murdered the another? To this, Yuri replied that nothing happened of him because he was the minor. Yuri replied that he did not have to face any consequence as he was a minor, but he had got only warning from the authorities. He is to avoid such duels further in his life. But it is very shameful. The Yuri informed that the boy who killed another was regretting that he did not have got any cut or any injury mark in this fight to make show of his bravery to the world. Now, Einstein got disgusted after hearing this account. He also felt bad for these students. Yuri but gave assurance to his friend that Einstein was going to be the bright student of the school in the coming years. I hope you well understood up to this part. Must watch the next part in the coming video. Thank you for watching the video.